Through this traumatic experience, Elizabeth has become an advocate for change related to child abduction, recovery programs, and national legislation. She's triumphantly testified right in front of her captor in the world about the very private nightmares she suffered during her abduction, which led to conviction. Elizabeth is currently involved in the Elizabeth Smart Foundation, and she has helped promote the National Amber Alert, the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act, and other safety legislation to help prevent abductions. She's also a news correspondent for ABC News. Elizabeth's abduction and recovery has motivated and continues to motivate parents, law enforcement, and leaders worldwide to focus on children's safety, emphasizing the vigilance of everyday people in finding missing children and the belief that there is always hope and we can never stop searching for each and every missing child. 2 years ago, Elizabeth worked with the Department of Justice and 4 other recovered young adults in creating a survivor's guide entitled "You're Not Alone: The Journey from Abduction to Empowerment." This guide is meant to encourage children who have gone through similar experiences to not give up and to know that there is life after tragic events. Elizabeth's example in life now is a daily demonstration that there really is life after a tragic event. Her speech not only tells her story, but also discusses topics such as overcoming extreme adversity and not allowing your past to dictate your life's future. Please join me in welcoming Elizabeth Smart.
It is truly an honor for me to be here today and to speak with you. I have to say, this was amazing. I couldn't do that. I really am honored to be here. In a movie that's recently come out, The Hunger Games, how many of you have seen The Hunger Games actually? Okay. So a good amount of you. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. But there is a quote I would like to take from it that I greatly appreciated. It was when President Snow was speaking to the game director guy, I can't remember his name, but he said, "The only thing greater than fear is hope." Now, though he's a bad man, we can take the good from that. Because that's true. The only thing greater than fear is hope. And hope is what helped me make through my kidnapping. Hope that I'd see my family again. Hope that I'd be rescued. Hope that I could go on to have a wonderful life. That and faith in God that He would never abandon me or leave me alone was what got me through my kidnapping. The scariest night of my life was the morning of June 5th. Up until that point in my life, my biggest nightmare was the wolf from the Never-Ending Story, if any of you have seen that. I had nightmares about that for years. But that night, my nightmare changed, and it became very, very real. I went to bed just as every other child should go to bed. And I remember hearing this voice. And at first I thought, oh, it must be part of a dream. And then this voice repeated again, and I heard, "I have a knife at your neck. Don't make a sound. Get up and come with me." And in that moment, I didn't think I had an option. I thought my only choice was to get up and to go with this man. I could feel the knife lying right across my neck. My younger sister and I, we'd shared a room, well, all of our life. And she was asleep in bed next to me. And all I could think of was, what if I don't go? Is he going to hurt her? Has he already hurt my family? Has he already gone through and hurt my brothers or hurt my parents? So I immediately got up and did exactly as he said. I remember my parents' home, first of all, is on one of the mountainsides overlooking Salt Lake. Salt Lake is situated in a valley surrounded by mountains where I grew up. And my parents' home overlooks the valley, and our backyard is separated from the wilds of the mountains by just one more street. one more street that has a vacant lot on one side, and there's a trailhead that goes up into the mountains on the other. Well, he had brought me up through the vacant lot and up into the mountains, and I remember the whole time praying so hard to find a way to escape. I remember just thinking, if God could part the Red Sea for Moses, he could part the trees for me. Somehow he could provide a way for me to escape. And I remember I kept looking and looking, and I couldn't find a parting. There was no way for me to escape. And I remember getting further and further back up into the mountains, and I stopped my captor and I said, "Don't you realize what you're doing? You'll go to jail for the rest of your life." And my captor looked at me, and he smiled, and he said, "I know exactly what I'm doing. The only difference is I'm not going to get caught." And I remember going further and further on. And as a 14-year-old girl, I didn't watch the news a lot. I wasn't what you'd call up-to-date on current events. But I would go to my parents' room at night and kiss them goodnight. And sometimes they'd have the news playing, and sometimes I'd sit and watch with them for a few minutes. And I'd remembered seeing there were several stories on about children who had been kidnapped, who only their remains had been found. It was later learned that they had been kidnapped, raped, and then killed. And so as I was getting run up into these mountains, that's what I thought was going to happen to me. I thought, this is it. He's just going to rape and kill me now. And so I stopped my captor again, and I looked at him and I said, "Well, if you're just going to rape and kill me, could you please do it here? So that my parents can find me, so that they can know that I didn't run away, so that they know that I wasn't upset with them, so that they can have some kind of closure in knowing what happened to me." Well, my captor looked at me again and he said, "I'm not going to do that to you yet." And we continued on. And we went on, and we went so far back that we finally crossed right over the top of one of the mountains and started down the other side. And we were still quite close to the top, but far enough down the mountain that it would be very, very unlikely that anyone would ever find us. And so I didn't know what to do, didn't know what to think. My captor brought me to this grove of trees, and I'll never forget what I saw. They had leveled out part of the ground, part of the mountainside, and they had set up a tent, outside of which there were tarps on the ground and tarps overhanging the ones on the ground, so it was like a covered patio. And out of this tent walked a woman, and she had on long linen robes, and she had on a long headdress, had long gray hair, no makeup. She looked like someone, I don't know, out of Hollywood's version of the Ten Commandments. And she came up to me and she opened her arms and she gave me this big hug, and I just didn't know what to think. I couldn't believe it. I'd been kidnapped and now I was being hugged. And so I tried to make sense of it, and the only thing I could think of was, well, she must have kidnapped me, or he must have kidnapped me because they can't have kids. And I must be the daughter they always wanted. That must be why they kidnapped me. Well, she brought me inside of the tent, and she sat me down on a bucket that was upturned inside, and she brought in a small basin and started to try to give me a sponge bath and change me. As a 14-year-old girl, if the word wallflower ever described anybody, that was me. And she started to try to change me, and I remember just fighting back. I remember holding onto my buttons so she couldn't unbutton my pajama top, and holding down my elbows so tight against my ribs so she couldn't slip it off over my head. And just to give you a silly example of what I was like as a 14-year-old, I remember being in show choir, and it was our first performance, and we walked out on stage, and we were in our uniforms. They were long black skirts and just innocent little white V-neck t-shirts. And I remember getting out on stage and just thinking, oh my goodness. I am so modest. I am showing so much of my décolletage. What is everyone going to think? Now that's just silly, and I mean, it was about as innocent as the neckline I have on today. But that's how I felt as a 14-year-old. So you can imagine with that mindset, having someone try to change me and bathe me, well, that was just about the last thing I wanted to happen. And we kept fighting back and forth, and finally she was like, if you don't let me do this to you, then I will have Emmanuel, which, by the way, was the name of the man I learned who kidnapped me, as I know him. I will have Emmanuel come in here and rip your pajamas and underwear off you and change you. And I realized, well, no matter how much I don't want her to bathe and change me, I really don't want him to do it. So I remember just going back and begging her and telling her, if I showered last night, I'm not dirty, just give me what you want me to wear and I'll put it on. So finally she passed me a robe just like hers, and I slipped it on over my head and took off my pajamas underneath. And then she got up and she walked out of the tent and left me alone. I remember just sitting there and crying and wondering, how had this happened? This time yesterday, I had been at school. I'd been getting ready to graduate junior high. How had this happened? Did my family know that I was gone yet? Were they okay? Were they looking for me yet? What was going to happen to me? I didn't even know. And in walked this man, Emmanuel, and he zipped up the tent door behind him and he started to talk. But I was so caught up in my thoughts and worries and fears that I wasn't listening to him at first. And finally I was able to calm myself down enough to hear him say, I hereby seal you to me as my wife before God and his angels as my witnesses. Well, I couldn't believe it. The only thing I could do was scream out no. Up in my entire life, I had my dream of Prince Charming storming my house, rescuing me from vacuuming the kitchen, carrying me off into the sunset, and living happily ever after. I mean, that was my dream of what marriage was supposed to be like. And when I screamed out no, this man looked at me and he said, if you ever scream out like that again, I will kill you. If it'll help you not scream out, I can duct tape your mouth shut. I knew I wasn't quite ready to die yet, and I didn't want my mouth duct taped shut, so I told him, okay, I won't scream out. I won't scream out again. And up until that point, my parents had done their best to protect myself, my siblings, our family from, well, some of the harsh realities that are out there. And I have to say they did a pretty good job, but unfortunately, that protective bubble didn't extend quite far enough. And I realized what was going to happen next, and so I started to beg and plead with my captor to not hurt me, to not touch me, to just leave me alone. I tried to tell him everything I could think of. I told him that he couldn't marry me. I was too young. I never said yes. He didn't have legal authority to do that. That didn't work. I tried telling him he was too old. He was older than my dad. He could maybe be my grandpa. That really did not work. I remember finally admitting to him that I was just still a little girl. I hadn't even started my period yet. And that didn't stop him. Nothing I said or did stopped him, and no matter how much begging, pleading, crying, it just didn't matter. I remember he forced me off the bucket I was sitting on and onto the ground, where he ripped off the robe that I had on, and he raped me on the floor of the tent. And I remember he got up and he looked down at me, kind of smiled, turned around and walked out of the tent. And I will never forget how I felt lying on the ground, feeling like I was so worthless and so filthy. If my family knew what had happened to me, would they even bother continuing looking for me? If they knew what had happened, would they want me back? Would they still love me? Would anyone want me? How could anyone want to be my friend? How could anyone want to talk to me or even look at me again? I wasn't even a real human being after that had happened to me. And I remember as I lay there, I thought about all the children that I'd seen on the news who only their remains had been found. And I thought, they are the lucky ones. They are the lucky ones because they aren't still alive. They're in a better place. They don't have to feel this terrible pain that I feel. They don't have to feel this terrible worthlessness that I feel. Wherever they are, no matter what you believe, it's got to be better than where I am at right now. And I remember falling asleep to those thoughts. And when I woke up, there was this man, Emmanuel, kneeling over me again. He had a thick metal cable wrapped tightly around my ankle and bolted into place so that I couldn't run away. And I remember following to see where this other end of the cable was at, and I saw it was bolted around this big tree. And I realized that I would have a better chance at chewing through the metal than getting it off of the tree. I mean, I couldn't climb it, and there certainly wasn't anything around sharp enough for me to cut. They made sure all of those items were well out of my reach. And I just remember sitting down and crying, just feeling like animals had a better life than I did at that moment. I remember just feeling like my life was worthless. And I remember wondering, is this going to be the rest of my life? Am I going to be a slave to these people for the rest of my life? And as I sat there, I thought more and more and wondered, well, even if my parents don't accept me back, life has got to get better than this. I can't sink any lower than this. There has to be something better. So I started to think of all the things that maybe I could do if I ever escaped, if I ever was rescued or freed, and even if my family didn't accept me back. And I thought, geez, if all else failed, at least, being a prostitute would be better than where I'm at. And so I started to think of trying to escape. I started to think of trying to survive, trying to make it back somehow. And I just didn't know how that was going to be possible. I was chained up. I was under constant guard. I was constantly being threatened. And as I sat there and thought of all these things, my mind couldn't help but wander back to my life just the day before and all of the things I had. And I started to think of how lucky I had been to have the family that I had, how lucky I had been to have the friends that I had, how lucky I was to really have the life that I had. And I remembered someone once telling me that the first thing you forget in a person is their voice. And I realized that I didn't want to forget my family's voice, and among my family's voice, I didn't want to forget my mom's voice. So I started to think of all the things that she had told me lately, like, Elizabeth, go clean your room. Elizabeth, you have a choice. You can either do the dishes or you can go practice. But once you finish the dishes, you'll have to go practice anyways. You go do your homework, dear. Elizabeth, have a good day at school. Elizabeth, I love you. Elizabeth, be home by 5:30. I remember saying all these things. I even remembered, and I would have given anything to hear in that moment, which I usually dreaded. I remembered her singing, "Oh, what a beautiful morning," at the top of her lungs in the morning to wake all of us up. And as I was thinking of all these memories, I had one come to mind where I'd come home from school and I was very upset. And I had told my mom I had been at school and I was sitting with my friends, and there was this popular girl who came up to our table and said, "Oh, I'm having a party this weekend at my house and you're all invited except you. You're not invited." And I remember I just felt so bad. Why didn't she want me to come? And my mom sat me down and said, "Elizabeth, is it really going to be that tough spending another weekend at home? Is it really going to be that bad being with me? Elizabeth, don't you know that popular is just another word for rude? And are those girls really your friends? Are those girls really your friends if at the first offer they leave you high and dry? Does that make them a good friend to you?" Well, I didn't really want to answer any of those questions, but she went on to say, "You will meet many people in your lifetime, and sometimes you'll wonder, well, geez, why doesn't this person like me? And you won't be able to change their opinion. Maybe you can, but maybe not. And then sometimes you'll have the other kind where you're like, geez, why does this person like me?" She said, "But of all those people who like you, who don't like you, of all their opinions, there's really only two opinions that matter in this life. The first one is God's opinion, and as long as you try to do what is right, try to be the best you, He will never abandon you. He will always love you. He will never turn His back on you. Only you can turn your back on Him. And the other person's opinion who you need to worry about is mine. And I am your mom. And I will always love you, no matter what you do, no matter where you go. I may not always love the choices you make, but I will always love you, and nothing can change that." And as I sat on this mountainside, I remembered my mom telling me that it didn't matter what happened, she would always love me, and I realized that she was right. I mean, how many times had she made dinner for me? How many times had she helped me struggle through my homework? How many times had she picked me up when I fell down and made me feel better? How many times had she always been there for me? And the more I thought about that, the more I realized that, well, certainly my dad's the same way. I mean, geez, I just hate to think of how many times, like, I've fallen over on my bicycle and he's had to pick me up and try to help me get balanced again and send me off, and then run with his hand behind my seat so that I didn't fall. I'm sure he probably lost like 10 pounds doing that. But I realized that, yes, this terrible thing had happened, but that wouldn't change my parents' love for me, that they would still love me, they would still accept me, I was still their daughter. And I realized that my siblings would still be the same. My brothers certainly wouldn't let me forget my place in life, and my sister would still be my best friend. So I made the most important decision I could have during my entire 9 months of kidnapping. I decided that no matter what happened, it didn't matter if it was 3 days or 30 years, whatever it was, if it was within my power, I would survive. And one day, I would see my family again. I would do whatever it took, but I would survive. And that decision, well, it saw me through a lot. I remember it saw me through 9 months of a lot. I remember through a series of events we'd ended up in California and we'd spent several months there, and they started to talk about the next city to go to. Big places like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and I just remember thinking, oh, if we go to one of those cities, no one will recognize me. No one will save me. No one's doing it here in California, so why would they do it there? If I want to get rescued, I need to make it back to Utah. I need to make it back to Salt Lake. How am I going to do that? I can't just go up to them and be like, wow, I vote we go to Utah. I vote we return to Salt Lake. No, that won't work. So I thought about it, and I decided I would try their methods. They were, well, one of the great things about America is that it was based on religious freedom. You are free to practice the religion of your choice. It may not always be easy, but that is a freedom that you are entitled to. And they took this freedom and they manipulated it so much because anytime anyone asked them something, they would say, it's against my religion, or it's part of my religion. And that's how they had justified kidnapping me. That's how they justified doing all the other bad things that they were doing, which we could spend all day talking about, but I won't. But so I remember sitting there thinking, and just saying, God, I promise I will never do this again if you will just let it work this one time. Just once, please. So I remember going up to my captor and saying, I don't know, but I keep having this feeling like we're supposed to go back to Salt Lake. I know it sounds crazy, and I know that, geez, God would never talk to me. I mean, I would never receive inspiration from him, but could you ask? Because I know he'll answer you. I mean, you're his prophet, you're his servant, you're practically his best friend. Could you please ask? Well, maybe that just stroked his ego the right way, and he's like, oh, finally. Or maybe he just felt like it was the right thing to do. I don't know. But he went off, prayed, whatever, came back and said, oh, you know, I think you're right. I think we should go back to Salt Lake. I cannot tell you, but the Hallelujah choirs were singing in my head in that moment. Finally, point one for me. So it was decided. We were going back to Salt Lake. And we ended up hitchhiking back. God bless those people who picked us up. I wouldn't. Not because I don't have compassion or empathy for those people, but more on grounds of personal safety. Anyways, we finally made it back to Salt Lake City, and I remember we were walking up State Street, and Salt Lake is set up like just one big grid, really. You've got the heart of downtown, and then you've got your first, second, third, fourth, south, and there's north and east and west as well. And we were out on State Street, which runs all the way through the heart of downtown Salt Lake from our state capitol building to the other end of the valley. And to tell you the honest truth, I'm actually not sure quite how far it goes out, but I know it goes out really far. But we were out on State Street at about 106 South, so pretty good distance from the heart of downtown Salt Lake, and we were walking up, and I remember just feeling like, I know I'm not home, but I almost could be. I mean, I was back in the state that I was born and raised in. I was seeing places that were familiar to me, and I was like, okay, this is it. I could be rescued. And I remember all of a sudden, police cars coming up, and more and more and more, and pretty soon just felt like we were surrounded by policemen. I'd never been around so many policemen in my life. Usually when I was in the car with my parents and the lights would go on, and then all of us would just be like, oh no. But this moment, wow, there were tons of them. And they surrounded us and they started asking my captors questions, and they started trying to ask me questions. But I had been so heavily threatened all my life that I had never been able to answer, not all my life, the last 9 months of my life. But finally an officer said, well, we need to separate your daughter from you, because that's what they said I was. So they separated me and they started asking me questions, and I gave them the answers that I'd been threatened to give. And I remember finally one of the police officers looking at me and just saying, "Are you Elizabeth Smart?" And boy, did the majority of me just want to scream out, "Yes, please rescue me." But there was a part of me that caused me to hesitate because I had been so heavily threatened. What would happen if I said yes, but they didn't believe me? What would happen if they released me back to my captors? What would they do to me? They had often told me that if I ever ran away or admitted that I was Elizabeth Smart, that they would kill me. If they didn't kill me, they would kill my family. And what perfect targets my family would make, because, oh geez, one tragedy had already happened. Who would ever think 2 tragedies could happen? It would catch them completely off guard. So that caused me to hesitate for, well, a minute. But like I said, the majority of me just wanted to scream out yes, and I finally admitted that, yes, I am Elizabeth. And the policeman turned me around, handcuffed me, and put me in the back of the car. Well, in my mind, I was just like, wait a second, I'm the victim. Like, I promise all those illegal things that I did, I will never do it again. I promise I didn't choose to do them, I was forced to do them, please. And since that day, I've had reasons of why they probably handcuffed me. I think the most common one is, well, they didn't know what you'd been through for 9 months, so they didn't know how you were going to react to everything. So as an issue of safety, they handcuffed you. Personally, I like my own better, which is simply, they saw in me then what I see in me now, a lethal weapon. Officer bringing me back to the station, bringing me to a tiny little room and leaving me alone. Took my handcuffs off, and he told me I could take off the disguise I'd been forced to wear, and then he left. And I remember just sitting there wondering what was going to happen when all of a sudden the door flew open and my dad came running into the room. And he just looked at me for a second and then started hugging me, and we both started crying. He's like, Elizabeth, is it really you? And I was like, yes, it is. And it was the happiest day of my life. I remember being transported up to the Salt Lake precinct where I saw my mom and the rest of my siblings. And I remember thinking, this must be what heaven is like. I can't imagine anything better. And I remember just being so happy and feeling so lucky, and I knew what I had remembered 9 months ago, knowing that my parents would still love me, was true. I knew that I never should have doubted it for a second, because they would have never given up on me. The following morning, my mom gave me the best piece of advice I've ever been given, and I'd like to share it with you because I think it can apply to all of us, because thank goodness not all of us have been kidnapped, but we all have trials, and none of them are any less than anyone else's trials. We may feel that way. We may feel like the Jones next door have a perfect life, but I guarantee it they don't. We all have our own trials that feel like they are impossible sometimes. But my mom said to me the morning after I was rescued, she said, "Elizabeth, what this man has done to you is terrible. And there aren't words strong enough to describe how wicked and evil he is. He's taken 9 months of your life that you will never get back. This will go through the courts. There will be some kind of verdict. He'll get some kind of sentencing, but you may never feel like justice is served. You may never feel like restitution is made. But the best punishment that you could ever give him is to be happy, is to not give him another second of your life, is to follow your dreams and to do exactly what you want to do." And that is so true. That is so true for each of us. Whether it's a mental health disease or a physical disease, whether it's abuse, physical, sexual, verbal, whether it's something as silly as your car not starting in the morning, that doesn't mean that we can't be happy. That doesn't mean that we can't have a wonderful life. That doesn't mean that what's happened to us needs to brand us for life. On the morning also that after I was rescued, I wrote a message to the world, thanking the world for everything that everyone has done for me, for the prayers, for the search efforts, for the sacrifices that have been made on my behalf. And I also said that I was the luckiest girl in the world. I still feel that way today. I am the luckiest girl in the world. I have come to a point in my life where I can be grateful for what's happened to me. I would never go out and say, "Please, I want to be kidnapped. Kidnap me." I would never say that. But I can say that because of what I've experienced, it has opened up so many doors and so many opportunities for me that I would have never had otherwise. For instance, if I had not been kidnapped, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be talking with you people. I wouldn't have this opportunity to share my story and hope. I would just be another blonde girl from Utah. And you can just bet everything I got it twice as bad as everyone else. You all, I'm sure, are aware of the reputation blondes get. But try having the last name of Smart. Whoever heard of a smart blonde? Yeah. It just wouldn't matter how charming and witty I may be, I wouldn't be here today. So I am grateful for what has happened to me because I've been able to meet wonderful people. I've been able to share my story and help those around me. I've been able to found the Elizabeth Smart Foundation with my dad. Can't do anything without him. But we've been able to work on 2 focuses, one of which is a child empowerment program called RAD Kids. It stands for Resisting Aggression Defensively. It doesn't matter whether it's bullying, whether it's physical abuse, whether it's kidnapping, whether it's verbal abuse. There are 3 principles that I want to share with you because I don't care if you're 3 years old or 300 years old. They still apply to all of us. The first one is, you are special and nobody has the right to hurt you. The second principle is, because you are special, you don't have the right to hurt anybody else, including yourself, unless, a big unless, someone is hurting you and you can make it stop. The third principle, which I think is most important, is it's not your fault and you can tell someone. These principles, they sound so basic, but they make such a difference to children. They make such a difference to adults. They make a difference to me. Our other focus are the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force agencies, helping to promote and to educate people on what's out there. I won't go into it too much because, yet again, we could be here all day. But all of us have an opportunity that is unique to us because all of us come from different backgrounds, all of us have different experiences, all of us have different gifts we can give, and you never know who you can affect, who you can help. You never know, and you will never know, well, maybe till we all die and go to heaven and God's there and said, did you know that when you did this, you know, you helped this person? We'll never know until that day. But one of my favorite quotes that I'd like to share with you is from Mother Teresa. She said, I know God won't give me anything I can't handle. I just wish He didn't trust me so much. And I know we all feel like that sometimes. So, in closing, I just want to say thank you so much for having me here. It's been such a pleasure. God bless you all.